prayer person?
Yeah, since I was little.
Okay.
I would pray, and I would pray really hard to God, and I would beg to be a missionary. And so all my life I would see this vision of wheat fields. I said, that's where I'm going to go. That's where I'm going to share about Jesus. And that never happened. So when, talk about fashion and a career in fashion, I felt guilty for a really long time.
When did you stop feeling guilty?
When I realized the opportunity to pastor.
Yeah, when you realized that fashion was the wheat field?
Yes, absolutely. And it was abundant. And there are so many people who are drawn to some sort of truth. They want truth. And we have the opportunity to speak it.
The Ferment.
Welcome to Season 2 of the Ferment podcast, conversations about worship and transformation. Today's guest is Lauri Varieur. Lauri is the former vice president of creative visual for the fashion brands BCBG Max's area and Donna Kieran. She's also the co-lead pastor of the Vineyard in Fullerton, California, along with her husband, Wade. This episode is brought to you by Monk Drums. Monk Drums is a creative desert venture that strives to combine beauty and business as one heartbeat. Monk Drums' main focus is handcrafted wooden drums that allow us to love, assist, and serve all who accompany us on this path. Use the coupon code FERMENTPOD to get 5% off your Monk Drums order. Find them on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Monk Drums, and every Monday look for hashtag Monk Drum Monday. Speaking from personal experience, monk drums are wonderfully crafted and they sound amazing. They blend the best traits of both the djembe and the cajon, and I found them to be incredibly versatile in both the live and studio environment. Check them out at monkdrums.com.
This episode is brought to you by our friends at Worshipteam.com. Worshipteam.com comes preloaded with over 12,000 songs, with new songs being added all the time. Hillsong, Bethel, Vineyard, Six Steps, Jesus Culture, just to name a few. Service building with Worship Team is a snap, and all the songs are completely legal and licensed. You can also find them on social media, Facebook at worshipteam.com, Twitter at worshipteam, Instagram at worshipteam_WT. Visit them at worshipteam.com for a free trial today. Complete worship planning with thousands of songs, easy interface, mobile apps, and legal rights for your church. All you need in one place, worshipteam.com.
Hey, Lauri.
Hey,
What's up with this rain in California?
I'm loving it. We need more rain. Rain. After it rains, the smell and the green that comes out. So I see it as life. I see it as like just, restoring the earth.
I get that. But what I'm getting at is I'm a Kentucky boy.
You brought it.
And I came to California not to be rained on.
Well, you can always go and do as the Californians do and get a spray tan.
That's right. I'm gonna pass on that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And in an hour, plastic surgery.
I'm gonna pass on that as well.
Okay, good.
But I'll leave that to you Californians. But I did want to comment and say, this is odd.
It's lovely.
Oh, this morning I was on my way to the gym with
Torrential.
Casey.
Of course. CrossFit?
Yeah, I was on my way.
Wow, big surprise. I didn't know he was into that.
That's right. I was on my way to the gym with Casey this morning, and of course it was pouring down rain, and I saw a guy, he completely spun out in his car and almost hit a telephone pole. So I've already had crazy driving experiences.
Here's the thing. In California, they don't know how to drive when it rains. They don't use their windshield wipers, and they don't use their blinkers. So, and they wonder why
noted.
Or road rage is rampant because, they're all everywhere.
Duly noted. Well, anyway, I'm glad to be in your house. I'm glad to be hanging out with you. You're one of my favorite people that I never get to talk to. And here's why I was stoked to have this conversation with you. Because I know that you are one of these people, these pastor people, I'm using air quotes right now. You're one of these pastor people. You've planted a church with your husband.
Yes.
But you have historically worked in high-end fashion. And so you kind of have a foot in two worlds that, at least in my mind, the Venn diagrams don't always overlap. And so I was just, gosh, that's just super intriguing. I was hoping maybe we could dig into that.
Yeah. Well, they don't, I guess, traditionally overlap, but people use the word bivocational. my husband and I work because we want to still be a part of what's happening in the world.
That's right.
And we love gathering on the weekend. We love it. It's a part of this whole planting journey.
Yeah.
But it is also, who are we in our everyday, right?
Yeah.
Who are we at home? Who are we when we're at work? Who are we as parents? Who are we? I think all of that makes us better pastors.
Yeah.
And that's not to say if you're a full-time pastor, you don't have that. But when you're a part of the fabric of the culture and what's happening, it gives you fuel to speak to it on the weekend when we gather.
I know, at least for me, I've almost always had another job, some other thing I was doing. And so I just really resonate with that as well. I guess before we get into that, we should just do some personal history because people don't know who you are. So
They don't? What do you mean?
Where are you from?
I'm from New York.
Okay. We're at
Greenwich
New York.
Village.
Okay.
And lived down the street from Bob Dylan's old flat and Steve McQueen's. And I lived above the famous Mexican restaurant. I don't recommend you eat there. I know too much. Behind the curtain. Panchitos. So Greenwich Village, yeah.
Yeah. And was that where your family, like, you have historical roots there? Like
No.
the whole fam is there? What's up?
Well, my family is East Coast. And so
Okay.
I grew up in New Jersey. And then when I was 16, got an art scholarship and went to art school.
Okay.
And so I was in high school, but still taking college courses in New York in art school.
Okay.
And moved out right when I graduated.
Yeah.
And lived in Greenwich Village.
Okay. Were your family believers?
They were, I would say, there was a long season, many years of not going to church.
Okay. But they had some sort of like God consciousness,
Yes.
Jesus
Yes.
awareness.
Yes.
Okay.
I would say not personal, and that came after my mom was hit by a car, and she was walking across the street, got hit by a car, and thrown 80 feet, right? Like, so she's 90 pounds,
Yeah.
and walking across the street. I mean, she really should not be here, but here she is, and she is the most on fire Jesus lover there is.
So the accident is what sort of baptized your family back
Yes.
into an active
Yeah,
faith?
yeah.
How
I'd
old
say
were you?
that. I was a senior in
Okay.
high school.
Okay. Yeah. So what did that look like? So your mom's about to die. You guys go to the hospital and everybody starts praying again?
Well, her cousin died of a blood clot the size of a pin dot. And she had about 100 blood clots the size of a thumbnail.
Okay.
And we prayed. I mean, that's all we knew what to do,
Yeah.
and they all dissolved. And, they took her to the wrong hospital. The hospital that they were supposed to take her to, they were supposed to amputate her legs.
No.
And they took her to the wrong hospital. We show up at that one hospital and they're like, she's not here. So they get on that dispatch thing and they're like, she's at this hospital. So we drove all down there and they specialize in trauma.
Okay. So she accidentally went to the perfect place.
The medic team looked at her injuries, and although they were contracted to go to one hospital, they made the decision to take her to a completely different hospital.
Wow.
And they did not amputate her legs. She does have metal braces
Yeah.
that hold her body together.
That's right.
But she is, like I said, she's alive. She's a Spitfire. She's a true New Yorker. She grew up on the Lower East Side.
Yeah.
So that should say it all.
That's it. And so was your faith sort of reawakened in that moment as well?
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, how could it not be?
Yeah.
You
So
see
you saw the blood clots dissolve and
the
you're in.
doctors. I mean, the doctors were like, this makes no sense. 80 feet. Her body is literally origamied. Right. And they put it back together. And so, when she was in a coma for about a month and a half. And when she woke up from the coma, she held our faces and she said, Jesus is real.
Yeah.
And like I said, this lady is tough. And when she says Jesus is real, you listen. And so we all sort of followed that. Like, Jesus is real.
Did you guys start going to church?
We started going to church. That's how I stumbled upon the Manhattan Vineyard, where I met Mike and Char Tergiano.
Got it. Legends in the Vineyard.
They are. Well, they're not only legends. I'll tell you that they have true hearts of what I think what we're supposed to be doing as Christians, much less pastors. I'll tell you, I walked into that church. My dress was too short. My dress was see-through. I was living a wild life. And a lot of people gave them heat and said, get this girl out of here.
Yeah.
What, look at her.
Yeah.
And they both said, hey, want to come on a ministry trip? We see something in you. And I think they brought me along on every single ministry trip that they went on, internationally and nationally.
Okay, and what were you thinking when you went on these trips?
It was a tipping point for me, because you see that in me. I don't see that. And I don't even think I could ever believe that. But you see that. And they kept inviting me into more. And so there's power in that. And, Wade and I try to do that. We have a church full of young people, and we're saying, do this with us. Yeah. Not do this for us, do this with us. This is what we see in you.
Yeah, that's real disciple making, isn't it? Yeah, somebody who believes in you and brings you along the way. Where did you go? What kind of places did you go? Like you said, international and then
okay.
national. Tell me what kind of places did you go?
All right. Well, I mean, obviously, whenever they traveled across the country, but Germany, every year we would go to Germany, and we would do this thing called Freakstock.
The crazy, like hardcore festival.
Yeah. They took us to Germany.
Yeah.
Wade was with me on one of those trips, and Darren, and it was just, seeing these people who, ex-prostitutes, ex-heroin addicts, people who are searching, right?
Yeah.
And then, right, they get to party with Jesus. Hardcore, really a great experience.
Yeah, so Mike and Char took you, and sort of that's kind of your reintroduction to church and absolutely your introduction to ministry.
Yes.
How much of Mike and Char influenced the kind of pastor you are?
I mean, I will say they are the influence, other than, obviously Jesus, but, and my husband now. I mean, Wade, I learn from Wade every Saturday, man, the way he deconstructs things. But Mike and Char, they love the rugged. And, I will say they see the redemption part in the rugged, right? And I love that, because I feel like I do that now, but I was taught that.
Yeah.
And I think that when someone says, I not only see this in you, but I believe that you can do this. People would come into town and they would say, okay, you're hosting them. And so, every week there was someone else new coming to town, and I would host them.
Yeah.
Bring them to a bar, bring them, to coffee. Yeah. Going head to head with like Jehovah's Witnesses, the most radical experiences.
Yeah. That's amazing that this was sort of your reintroduction back to church.
A little bit backwards.
Yeah. Yeah. Your mother survives.
Yeah.
She comes back and says, Jesus is real.
Yeah.
You show up at the Manhattan Vineyard. You just happen to run into Mike and Char. They take you all over the world.
Yeah.
And they're basically, just by being around them, they're cultivating kind of a pastor call. That's what I hear.
Yeah.
Or that pastoring side, or a particular style of reaching out to people, and it stayed with you. That's what's kind of amazing.
Well, that's the part that I really have to highlight, is that so many people came at them, because I don't want to say they didn't see it. They were seeing the rugged parts of me, the parts that I'll say it, unlovable, the hard parts, the sharp edges. And they were saying, this one? And, Mike would always say to me, after my feelings would get hurt, after the 20th time you hear it, he would say, there's something about you. And I was thinking, maybe it's the way I dress, or, maybe I'm funny. But he was talking about something different, and I
He
get
was talking
that
about
now.
your true self, your heart.
I believe so. I mean, even to this day, he still is a voice in my life, of truth, and someone that I trust.
Beautiful. Okay, so let's go back to like art school. So you're meeting Jesus.
Yes.
You're doing the ministry. You're going to Freak Stock.
Yes.
You're hanging with Mike and Char.
Yes.
But you stayed in art school.
Stayed in art school.
Were
yeah.
you always an artist?
Yeah.
Okay.
For sure.
What kind of artist were you? Even from a little kid?
Okay. Well, like I believe I love any sort of creation, right? So anything that's creative, I'm really drawn to. And I think you can be creative intellectually too. Like you can, read a book and, God can speak to you.
Yes.
Right. And he speaks to us through creation. And I love nature, but styling, like through clothes and fashion, I would do that. Like I was really young and I would just put clothes together, with my hair. I'd have a mohawk and, pair that with like a classical party dress, right? Like I just sort of like putting things together that might not make sense.
Yeah. So how old were you when you started doing this kind of stuff?
I don't know, 12.
Yeah. Okay. Were you doing anything before? Were you always drawing or painting?
Yeah.
And
everyone in my family is creative.
Okay.
And everyone is in fashion. So
everyone's in fashion.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
Well, I mean, my mom, like I said, this woman would put herself together like nobody's business. And so as young kids, we would just watch her, and so all of us sort of took to that. But I would say, like, for me, my biggest creative expression would be styling and putting clothes together and maybe an ad campaign together.
So you were always just bent towards style, fashion, marketing. Those were
branding. Yeah.
That's kind of your thing.
Yep.
Even from 12 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say
and
that.
you just happen to be living in the part of New York where that is completely all around you.
It is at that time. Now it's Brooklyn.
Yeah.
But at that time, New York, especially, the Lower East Side, Soho, downtown.
How much of that New York influence has stayed with you creatively?
I think it will always stay with you.
Yeah.
I think, you have to, wherever you are, you have to look at things and adjust and have eyes and lenses for, God's creation. So it really is, up to us not to dull those senses.
Yeah.
So I think it will always be with me wherever I am.
Okay. So you were in a creative and fashion family and you went to art school, you met Jesus. Did you go to college for this kind of thing?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Where'd you go?
I went to SVA, School of Visual Arts, and FIT,
Okay,
Fashion Institute.
Okay. And then what is your degree?
Oh, just actually in advertising design and fine arts.
Got it.
So it wasn't fashion because for me, fashion is like really personal.
Okay.
And so I happened to end up there for my career, but I really am into art. I love art history. I love modern art.
Yeah. A couple of weeks ago, some of the Vineyard worship team and we went downtown to LACMA.
Okay. Yeah.
And just to be in those spaces.
Yeah.
It makes me feel alive.
Yep. Me too.
Even if I don't even really understand what's happening with some of the pieces that are on the wall or in the space.
Right. I mean, the process of someone creating something, I think, is an attribute of God. And so even if we don't understand it, it is personal. And I think that's an amazing thing. Whether the artist makes that connection, I think is interesting that they don't make that connection, but it is a God-given gift to create.
Yeah, well, the opening chapters of Genesis are God as a creator.
Yeah,
that's the first
right.
revelation of who God is.
That's right.
And then, in Genesis 1 and 2, it says that God made people in his image.
Yeah.
And the first image we have of God is that he's a creator, right?
That's right.
So like whatever the divine image is, it has to be
That's right.
with our capacity to make things.
He's a creator. He's a designer. He's an artisan. You know, he is like, he works with his hands. You know, it talks about that. And I love that.
Mm-hmm. Amen. All right. So when did you start working in fashion?
Right out of college, I had an opportunity to go to Paris and work in a Paris fashion house that's really famous in France, and lived there for about a year and a half. And that was great. But that, I mean, talk about people who don't like Jesus.
Yeah. Okay. So how did you handle being in Paris? And I would imagine on the one hand, it's exhilarating because it's, you know, it's kind of like ground zero for fashion.
Right.
And so that's got to be exhilarating. But on the other side, if I understand your story, you've reawakened to Jesus.
Right.
Mike and Char have taught you how to pastor people, and they've loved you in your edginess, I think is even one of the words you used. So how did you live your Jesus life? Or how did that express, or what happened in Paris?
Well, I mean, you know, Paris, like, you know, that culture is so, it awakens every sort of sense, right? Talk about the food, the fashion, the art, the history. It's amazing. And I'll tell you, you know, when you're in the world, right, and you're working or you're living, we all live in it, it calls to you hard, you know, and you need a grounding, you know, or you're just like floating like a hot air balloon. You need grounding. And so I always felt that I could easily lose myself, you know, in the circles that you run in, the people that you meet. You're out all the time, right? You're out like what, like, you know, 10 o'clock, you get home at 6 from work, you take a nap, you get up at 9:30 and you go out, you're home at like, you know, 4 a.m. and then you start all over again.
Yeah. So Paris exposed you to the ways in which the world can call to you.
Yeah.
But your faith was a source of grounding. Is that what I'm hearing?
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that, I think I would still be floating in that hot air balloon, you know, if I didn't have my faith. Because like I said, the world calls to you and it is so loud. It is so attractive. It is so enticing. And the seduction, it's not people who seduce us. It's ourselves. It's the things that we see and we forget who we are.
Yeah.
So yeah, that grounding was really important.
Hello, everyone. Adam here. Wanted to break into our conversation really quickly just to remind you of our Sing Together conference that's happening this March 26, 27, and 28 in Nashville, Tennessee. It is the first national worship conference that we have hosted in the Vineyard for over 20 years. And for that reason, we are really, really excited. It's always great to have everybody in the room at the same time. I found that special things happen when we're all together. Anyhow, some of our best friends are going to be there. Eleanor Mumford is coming to speak to us. Dee Wilson from Common Hymnal is going to be there. I'm going to be there. And then we have some other friends that we're going to release here in a few weeks who are joining us as well. We're getting all the details settled. And the thing for you to do today is to sign up because space is very limited. Lots of people have already registered and that limited space has become even more limited. So why not go on to vineyardworship.com today and sign up because I'd really, really love to have you in the room. All right, peace. What part of your Jesus experience up to that point were you drawing on? I'm just imagining, you know, you're living in this great place, and I'm also imagining you being kind of a fairly new Christian in some ways, and you've had these experiences with the Tergianos. What were you kind of like drawing on to have grounding?
I just, the truth is, I always, I love to pray.
Okay.
So I'm praying all the time.
Okay.
Even now I'm praying.
Yes.
You just don't know it. And that communal relationship, if you listen, that softness, this isn't going to make sense, that softness of voice of God is louder than the world.
Yeah.
Even though it's not like blaring in lights, and it's not like these like bright lights shining in your face, it is beautifully soft, and it is louder than the world. And so that's really what grounded me, was just, praying and the seeking and going, I know what I'm capable of if I don't stick close to
right.
God.
Were you always a prayer person?
Yeah, since I was little.
Okay.
I would pray, and I would pray really hard to God, and I would beg to be a missionary. And so all my life I would see this vision of wheat fields, and I said, that's where I'm going to go. That's where I'm going to share about Jesus. And that never happened. So when, talk about fashion and a career in fashion, I felt guilty for a really long time.
When did you stop feeling guilty?
When I realized the opportunity to pastor.
Yeah, when you realized that fashion was the wheat field?
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it was abundant. And there are so many people who are drawn to some sort of truth. They want a truth. And we have the opportunity to speak it.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting that you would have had a vision of wheat fields, even as a small kid, and it awakened some sort of a missionary thing in you? But isn't it interesting that oftentimes we maybe have these experiences, and I think that's God talking to you, But isn't it interesting you have these experiences, and as a kid you're getting it right, but you're also overlaying your own cultural assumptions as to what that wheat field is or how it's supposed to be.
I didn't get it. I missed it.
Yeah.
So I wasted all this time feeling guilty, and missed the opportunities that God was bringing all these people, including the owner of this high fashion brand, in New York. And she would come to me after she would go to this guru. I don't know if I'm allowed to mention his name. His name, Deepak Chopra.
Okay.
And she would meet with him. And then right after, she would come to me and want to dissect what he said. And I got to refute the things that he said, and again, I think God puts us in these positions, and we get to say no to them, or we get to ignore them, or we get to step into them.
Okay, so part of your journey has been that the owner of the fashion house that you worked for would go see Deepak.
Yeah. Who hates Christians, by the way.
Okay.
I mean, talk about Paul, this guy goes after Christians hardcore.
Okay, so have a meeting, come back, tell you, and you would be like, okay, time out.
Right.
Okay. And this is in the context of work.
This is in the context of work. She was just one of many who they would know that I was Christian. And, I remember I was on a subway with someone, and she closed her eyes, laid out her hands, and she had heard about what happened to my mom. And she was a colleague at work, and she said, "Pray for me." And I was just looking at her, I'm like, okay. She needed to know that I was praying to Jesus, right? Because there's so many other gods that people pray for. So I think it's really important.
Or even just the idea of disembodied spirituality.
Right.
Just
right.
Some of that stuff.
Well, that's what Deepak, was speaking, pray to this crystal, pray to your own energy and create your own destiny through your own energy. Mm-hmm. Right. And obviously, my boss is a smart businesswoman, and she knows that you cannot create your own destiny without a higher power. Mm-hmm. And so who is that higher power? I get to tell her that it's Jesus.
That's right. Well, and that's a part of our Christian story too, is It's not disembodied spirituality.
Right.
It's embodied in Jesus. But because of that, like it actually makes sense in a lot of the work that you've been about and have been doing. And what I'm trying to get at there is Christianity is embodied spirituality in the person of Jesus, who had a body, who lived a life, who had his own work, who made tables or
Right.
did whatever he did with his father in the carpentry shop, right? So there's this overlapping of spirit and matter. Every day is a day that we could meet God and encounter him. And I just think it's kind of beautiful that you were this person that was and is pastoring, your boss in a certain way and all the people that you work with. I just think that's wonderful.
Well, I don't think that there should ever be like a line, right? That goes like, okay, this is my tent making, right? And then I go into the Holy Huddle, right? And it's two separate things, right? Like it should flow, right? If Jesus, right, the Holy Spirit is flowing through us, it's at every moment. We don't turn that off. The frequency should be literally set, right? Yeah. And wherever we go, right? So Trader Joe's, right? They should know us, right? Like dropping everything, like, I'm going to pray for you. You're bagging my groceries. I'm going to pray for you right now. What's going on with your hand?
That's right.
When we're on the subways, right? Like the most intimidating things, right? Like, happen on the subways. We get to step into whatever God is doing, and he's constantly inviting us. So it's not like, right, like the secular world meets, your pastoring world. It's all pastoring. It's all always, right, redeeming.
Yeah, there's no artificial separation between secular and sacred.
I don't think so.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of those lies that's I think really crippled a lot of people. Or even kept people from walking in the wheat field that they were called to walk in, just to bring it back to the image you had as a child, right?
Sure. I think it also promotes, we have a saying in our church, like, are you double lifing?
What does that mean?
Well, like, okay.
For you in your church?
All right. If you're coming to church, right, on a Saturday and you're one way, and then the rest of the days of the week, you're another, where you're spending most of your time, and you're not reflecting Jesus and you're not taking those Holy Spirit opportunities, you're double lifing, So, you can lift your hands up in the air and you can sing loud, and that's a beautiful experience. But this walk with Jesus is more than just an experience. It is our lives. Really.
Totally.
And everything else is just distraction.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is you're shooting for that seamless experience of being a believer in the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you and Wade, your husband, you planted a church.
Yeah.
How long ago was that?
That was 5 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
Well, again, Wade and I did not set out to plant a church. We were doing a Sunday night service at another church, and all these young people showed up. And
which makes sense because you're cool people.
Well,
right?
I don't. You know what? I wouldn't say that, but
I said it.
Okay,
I think
all
you're
right.
cool
If
people.
you say it, then it must be true.
That's
Keep
right.
telling people that.
That's right.
But all these young people just started showing up, and so when we were setting to leave this church, we just said, we'll just leave quietly, and one by one, these young people just came over to us and they said, "Where are you going?" Because that's where we're going. We're following you guys because we see you guys as our pastors. And, I think that was really humbling because you're just doing it, right? Like it's title, or you're calling me a pastor. We're just doing it. So I think it's the people who ordain you, right? Like a movement, I don't want to say it's baloney, but like a movement ordaining you. But when the people ordain you and the people say, "You're my pastor," man, I'm all about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So whatever was going on, you guys are doing this meeting and you have these young people and you feel like they're in some ways speaking something about your life in a new way.
Right. And so Wade, we laugh about this. Wade, who is the worst promoter, right? He said, we don't even have a building. If you show up and you want to meet, it might even be in our house, in our bedroom. And everyone just looked at him. I mean,
It's like, are we starting a cult?
Right. Exactly. Right. It was like John Lennon and Yoko Ono. Yeah.
And we're in Southern California.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. Oh man, that's incredibly funny.
Right.
The other thing I like that you just said there is, Wade's a terrible promoter.
He is.
But you're the promoter.
What do you mean?
Because you've always been in marketing and promoting.
That's right.
Yeah, isn't it great how God like brings gifts and people together?
I got to tell you, it's ironic because that's my specialty in career. However, our church is like the deconstruction of like marketing and branding for a church.
Amen.
I mean, it is completely like gloss. It's not glossy. It is not shiny in any way. I mean, it's an old punk building. It is brick and mortar, literally brick and mortar.
Yeah.
It's in the worst part of town, in the worst part of the city. And I love it.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for where God has us.
I think that's beautiful too. Just imagining sort of the juxtaposition of your day career and your pastoring work. On one side, you have this one foot in this very glossy, very beautiful world. And then in this other world, you're in the maybe not best part of town, and you're dealing with actual real people who have actual real lives and everything that comes along with that.
Right.
I think that's wonderful. I think it's really wonderful.
Well, that's where, for me, where the beauty is. I mean, I will say, like, I feel like God, at the same time, parallels deconstructed me, right? So, like, you can wear the most prettiest dresses and high heels and your face all made up, right? Picture perfect. And in the inside dying, right? And, I look at our church and I look at the messiness of it, right? People hurting and people broken. And that's where I want to be, right? Like, I want to be with the people that God says, these are my treasure.
That's great. That's great. Hey, can we switch gears here for a second and kind of go back to something you were mentioning earlier? I want to talk to you about pastoring where you work and just sort of maybe how you navigate some of that. Because in some of our conversations that we've had before, one of the things that I know about you is that you pastor the people who work for you and work with you.
Yeah.
And I also know, actually, when I think about you, I think about someone who is a prophetic person. And I know you've told me some stories about just doing what God says, even at work or whatever. So I was wondering if you could just share with us for a minute or two. Talk to me about like pastoring your employees or your associates, or how to have a pastor heart at the office and in like kind of a professional environment. Because like you were saying earlier, there is no divide between sacred and secular. And you're a pastor all the time, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Can you just talk to us about that?
Well, there are laws, right? So human resources, like you cannot like bring religion into the workplace, right? And so you have to be really careful about that. But people are going to ask questions, and if they ask questions, right, you can answer them. In my work environment, again, I don't ever think that there should be separation of who you really are, right? So if you have integrity at home, you should have it at work. If you have integrity at church, you should have it also at work. And, I believe slow kingdom coming, right? So you get to know people relationally when you allow them to know really who you are. And so the people that worked for me, again, for years and years, I mean, like over a decade, I had the same team that was with me. And they had come to know that we planted a church. What's interesting...
Was that a surprise to them?
No.
No, because they already knew who you were.
They knew who I was. And, I'll say this. I would get to work, and then an hour of my morning time would be blocked out. And that would be a time where anyone on my team can come in and receive prayer or counsel.
Yeah.
And it was always filled. I mean, that part of my schedule was always filled. And, sometimes it was navigating life.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was, I don't know what I'm doing with my life.
Yeah.
And a lot of time it was prayer.
It's amazing. Okay, so you're saying in your calendar, you had an hour always scheduled, marked out, and just so that someone who worked with you or for you could come and just be with you, and
yes,
we could just do whatever it needed to be done.
Yes, every day.
Man, that's pastoring. That is so pastoring.
Some would call it that, and some would just say, I'm meeting with my boss.
Yes.
But they all knew that I was a follower of Jesus.
Yeah.
And we had a gathering when Wade and I were being ordained by Mike and Char. My team came and they bought all the food, and they showed up. And that was that spoke such volumes to me, because they were publicly saying, we see you. And yes, we're ordaining you as not just our boss, but also as our pastor. And that group that worked for me also were the biggest contributors financially to our outreaches. I mean, we would have, fundraisers, and they were the most generous.
How beautiful. How beautiful. That's great. I love that. I love the idea of what you were sharing, especially when I first asked you this question. Maybe human resources and maybe the laws that sort of govern us say, you can't bring overt religious pressure into the work environment, which makes sense. I get that. I get that.
Really, Christian is the only one that is actually defined. Any other, whether it's spirituality or any other faiths are more accepted. But you bring Jesus in, and there's, you're going to get called into, HR.
Yeah, but what I loved about what you were sharing is that if you live your life with integrity, or if there's something genuinely open, right, bright, righteous about you, that it does cause people to pay attention and for them to ask questions and become inquisitive. So in some ways, it's like, okay, if HR says this, well, then I'm just going to be on my game, right? Like, it calls us up to something.
Right.
I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Right. Yep. Absolutely. I mean, in our church, we have another saying, which is live a worshipful life. That's all around, right? Like, worship is a beautiful expression, to God. When we sing, when we create, all that sort of stuff. But also, how are you living your life? How are you in your giving? How are you in your obedience? How are you in your rebellion? That is worship too.
Yeah. Yeah. All these opportunities.
Right. And the world is watching.
Yeah.
The world is watching. The unchurched world is watching.
I was wondering maybe if you could share a little bit more here. There's probably a lot of people who listen to this podcast who are school teachers.
I love that because my husband's a teacher.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Wade is.
I'm his biggest fan.
That's right. But there's all kinds of people. There's not, this podcast is not just pastors and worship leaders. It's moms and dads, it's school teachers, it's people who are owning businesses, people who are working at businesses and who love Jesus. Where would you tell them to maybe start? What's something you'd like to share with them beyond what we've even just talked about up to this point?
I mean, I met with someone yesterday who asked me that exact thing.
Okay.
Where do I start? And she said, how do you hear God? And this is the most wonderful thing. This is the good news, that God speaks to us in our own language, right? So if you're a mom and you're with your kids, he speaks to you in that way, specific in that context. If you're at work and you're a career person, the same thing. If you're a mechanic, whatever it is that you are, he speaks to us personally. And so I always invite people to say, listen, because if you're really in a posture of listening and that posture of wanting to hear him, you'll hear him.
Yeah, you're going back to that prayer thing you mentioned way earlier, aren't you?
Yeah, it should flow. It should be this constant flow, like earbuds in our ears, constantly listening and responding, not just listening, responding and asking.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe one more question here. There's probably some people who are listening to the podcast who are called by Jesus. They're disciples. They've given their life to God. They are faithful. And at the same time, maybe their interests and their skills are maybe not church stuff, Maybe that image of that you had when you were a kid really resonates. Like there's a wheat field, But maybe they're waking up to the fact that the wheat field is not going to be necessarily Sunday morning. Maybe it's going to be art or creativity, or maybe it's going to be go get their PhD or something. What would you like to say to people who are maybe struggling to discern their wheat field or struggling to feel permission?
Yeah. Well, that's a really good question because I think that God has purposes for our lives, and we can easily miss it because we have an idea of what that should look like. And what I've learned is, when God asks us to do something, a lot of the times it makes sense to no one. And in fact, the fear in us is that we will be made to look a fool to everyone else. And so we hold back in what we're supposed to do. And, I've learned that when God asks us, even if it doesn't make sense to the world, and even if it doesn't make sense to us, and there's a bit of fear, I've learned to walk and step into that fear because God will always amaze me with what he's already planned.
A little bit of what I hear you saying is sometimes we think of fear as telling us where not to go.
Right.
But I kind of hear you saying maybe sometimes fear is the direction you should head.
Right. Not obviously not, all the time, but if we're communing with God, right, and we're praying and we're seeking and we're saying, okay, Lord, I'm going to submit this to your will. I'm going to submit my future to your will.
Yeah.
This is what I'm telling my girls now, both my teenage daughters, is you want his will. Trust me, you don't want your own, because you're going to step in a whole big pile of dog do. But if you want his will, it's going to be right. It's going to be right for your life. And so we tend to fear that, giving up that control.
Yeah, we fear the unknown.
Right.
All that stuff.
Right. And we think we know better than God, right? So we're constructing, we're architecting our lives. We even already know like the kind of car we're going to get, we see ourselves driving it, we know where we're going to live and God has other plans and they're always better.
Yeah.
But sometimes they won't make sense, but especially to the world.
Yeah.
And so I've learned to step into that.
That's a great word. Hey, there's one more question I feel like I want to ask you all of a sudden. You also occupy this space in my brain of like powerhouse woman. You feel like a boss lady in the best way. Is there anything you'd like to say to some of the maybe younger girls who are listening to us right now? And I don't know. I'm just imagining some of the younger girls who are probably even being invited by God to do some things. Yeah. I would love for you to speak to some of those, maybe even in some of the ways that you're speaking to your own daughters.
Yeah. I don't see myself in that way. So it's funny to hear that. Like I actually see myself as someone who has been completely obliterated by God, like really deconstructed, So I see myself actually someone who's just learning every day. But I will say this, that I tell my daughters and I tell all of their friends who occupy our house, and they hang here, and they're seeking and they don't see themselves the way God sees them. In fact, they hate themselves. They pick themselves apart so easily, and, I do think, the disease of social media has a lot to do with it, body image and self-image. And I always say that God has something for you. Mm-hmm. And he has purpose for your life. And he'll speak to you about what that is. And a big thing is not to settle for what is right in front of them and the easiest road. And it's that. It's really accepting who they are in Jesus and accepting his love, because most of them don't like themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how some of social media has made that more difficult, because we can just constantly compare ourselves to things that are probably not even real.
Right. And it's ironic. That's what I do. That's part of what I do is, for branding and marketing. And, and at the same time, I want to have nothing to do with it, because it really is about, programming people to believe one thing. And it's never the truth.
Yeah.
It's all bells and whistles, smoke and mirrors. And, we really could use that tool for something that's greater and for something that's very, very good. But for the most part, most people want to be seduced. They want those images, and they don't realize that it's really making them feel worse about themselves.
Yeah, isn't that wild? It's so crazy. The algorithms know.
Yep.
I've said it on this podcast a few times. The robots are winning.
Right. But I think we could be different. I really do. I love a great groundswell. I really do. I love a great rebellion. And
okay, so talk to me. How can we be different?
Hey, we can be different by being Jesus-like, right? Like we're a part of, we don't remove ourselves from the culture, but we need to be different from the culture. And, some people say, well, that's not easy. Like we're inundated by all these images and influences. We are the influencers because we have the influencer. And I truly believe that truth, right? Gospel truth, biblical truth, people want that. So, sugarcoating it and watering it down, that doesn't work. It doesn't work. Putting a big red ribbon on something, trying to sell people. Just be who Jesus has created you to be.
That's great. Just be who Jesus has created you to be. Love it. Love it. It's a good word. Simple.
There's no marketing on that.
That's great. Start a new campaign.
Yeah, it would make no money, but you would have so much peace and joy, right?
You'll have eternal life.
Right. You'll have eternal life. You'll have a follower of one.
That is right. Well, hey, here's what I want to do. I want to end the podcast with this question. And because this is season 2, we have a new question. Can you just tell us what the dream of your heart is right now? What are you dreaming about?
I'll tell you, this is like ironic, sharing a secret prayer to many. Southern California, is filled with shiny churches, many, 3 on the same block, right? It's like bigger than Starbucks and McDonald's, right? There's a church for everyone.
Yeah, especially here in Orange County.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And they're all bigger and better. And they all like have these like huge marketing budgets, and good for them. If you're going to get the word out, that's great. And I asked God, I said like, God, are we supposed to do that? Or like, are we doing something wrong? Should we be like growing at that fast pace? Are we supposed to be doing things like that? And I felt like God said, did I ask you to do that? No, I've asked you to love every single person that I've put in front of your face, right? Whether it's in the church or outside of it. And so my secret prayer would be to do that well and not to get in the way of that, which I can easily do. And that people who would stumble upon our church would feel loved and well cared for, and that they would find Jesus.
Amen. Amen.
I want a church full of people who are doubters, who are naysayers, who don't know what they believe. Because that's the opportunity, right? Like,
well, if there's no space for them, where are they going to go?
Right.
Right.
Really, we do have a church full of people who don't know what they believe. Some of them know what they believe, but a lot of them don't. We get to step into that opportunity to show them and to tell them. And, so my heart would be that we would love them well, the way Jesus, that Jesus would like show up at our church and say, I'm staying.
A church that Jesus would go to.
Yeah, and stay.
That's right. That's right. High fives. That was so good. Hey, thanks for sharing just your heart and your life with us this afternoon.
Thank you.
And don't stop doing the stuff you're doing.
I won't.
That's right. Don't stop doing it. All right, everybody.
Can't stop, won't stop.
That's right. All right, everybody. Listen, you need to do some, maybe some reflection, a little reflection this week. What is your wheat field? Where is it? What is the place that Jesus is inviting you to? You can go there with confidence. All right. Peace.
Casey Coram here, producer of the Ferment podcast. Thanks for listening. I just wanted to remind you about our Sing Together conference in Nashville, Tennessee from March 26th through 28th. It's going to be a great time and we hope to see you there. For more information, go to vineyardworship.com. All right, people. See you next time. Peace.